If the Magnificent Seven worked together to form a sovereign nation, their combined valuation would represent nearly a fifth of the global economy. Yet their power relies on a technology born in a small European town, which I guarantee 99% of you could not find on a map. It takes advantage of a light so fragile that air absorbs it like a sponge. It is the size of a school bus with a price tag of 50 Super Bowl ads, and its creator has only a fraction of Apple's workforce, yet it is the only monopoly that matters. This is extreme ultraviolet lithography, and in a nutshell, it is the real-world equivalent of magic. However, that magic is about to become a nightmare for everyone else.
There is one man in Veldhoven who isn't fond of the flashiest headlines, but while we watch the CEOs of the world's largest companies testify before Congress, they are all tenants of the home he leads. And by the end of this video, you'll understand what that means for the global economy and your everyday life.
A few months ago, I released a video on the disruptor that was Apple's silicon chips, and the GPUs that made Nvidia a $4 trillion empire. But the dominance of those two brands relies on two companies thousands of miles from Silicon Valley. My last video would have said TSMC, but while the marvels that come out of Taiwanese fabs fuel the global economy, the underlying architecture of your iPhone depends on a tool only this Dutch giant can produce. So, why has the world reduced itself to a single point of failure? These are semiconductors, pieces of electrically conductive material containing switches invisible to the naked eye. Explained like I'm 5, when they spark, the screen you're watching this video on becomes possible. These semiconductors mediate between conductors and insulators, and their switches, or transistors, act as the foundation for modern day technology. While you believe the CPU is the brain of the computer, these materials are its DNA. Whenever you hear about figures such as 2nm chips, it means we are physically pushing these guys to the limits of known physics. Apple, Nvidia, and AMD are marketers. They know how to style their products, polish the storefront, achieve the statistics only the most hardcore users care about, and of course, provide the ecosystems that rule our everyday lives. But something weird happens when you subtract transistors from the equation. You no longer have your devices. It is simply too taxing for American companies to produce these transistors by themselves. So, they take the logical step of outsourcing production to fabs over 8,000 miles away from their capital.
That production is outsourced to the foundation of the Taiwanese economy, with a market cap of just under $2 trillion, TSMC. But even they can't do it alone.
Although they are nearly quadruple their size, TSMC continues to scale down their transistors by looking to the Dutch giant ASML holding company. In this scenario, TSMC is the middleman, a very necessary one, but a middleman nonetheless. That's because ASML's brainchild, its lineup of EUV lithography machines, is the only one in the world capable of producing hardware rivaling literal atoms in size. In this sense, the global supply chain of critical components is basically a line of Russian nesting dolls. If you have watched my Computers Backstage series, you would have heard of this already. But, for perspective, taking away the marketing fluff, going into the territory of 2nm processors is looking at 10 silicon atoms arranged end to end.
Just really quickly, if you found value in what you've seen so far, chances are you want to stay ahead of friends and family on the industry and the geopolitics at hand. If so, there's a community of 94 others just like you, so why not join our push to 100? Back to the physics of the 21st century.
The view of ASML as the only monopoly that matters is not held in a vacuum. This was proven in 2012 through the company's Customer Co-Investment Program, a funding pact granting equity investment and the opportunity to make commitments in the billions to Intel, TSMC, and Samsung. These three are among the company's largest customers, and through this pact, They carry the collective consensus that the development of these lithography machines is a mainstay of one of their most profitable businesses. They are actively building the monopoly they can't control, and each of them is aware of this fact.
Now, this monopoly wasn't simply thrust upon them, but they know that the magic of scaling down chips is thinking outside the box. Like, literally. I mean breaking out of the boundaries of the laws of physics. But to understand how this magic works, we have to look at a light that should not exist.
Imagine drawing a line on a blackboard with some chalk. The goal of the line is to get through a single particle of that chalk's dust. Knowing this, you realize the line, regardless of its thickness, is simply too large to actually go through that fragile particle. That is what regular light is in the making of semiconductors. The purpose of this rather specialized light we use in lithography is to draw intricate patterns onto silicon wafers to create the circuits that power our world. However, because regular light is too large to work with around fragile components, scientists use extreme ultraviolet.
While that sounds like a zany shade of purple or violet, it is on the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. The side that's absorbed by oxygen and makes you blind just by seeing it. So, what use is a light that gets destroyed when touched?
While you don't have to worry about stumbling into it on a random day, you do have to know where it comes from. This is ASML's EUV lithography machine. It weighs over 165 tons and is shipped in parts by 250 crates through 3 Boeing 747 cargo planes. Larger than a school bus, they are 4 meters high and 14 meters long, and they come with price tags in the $350 million range. To generate ultraviolet light, they use a substance called laser-produced plasma. This substance is created when a series of intense lasers strike matter, displacing electrons and, in the process, forming plasma, a hot ionized gas. In the case of lithography, the matter being targeted by those intense lasers are tin droplets, about 25 microns in diameter, ejected from a generator at speeds of up to 70 meters a second. When they fall, the droplets are first hit by a low-intensity laser that makes them flat like a pancake.
Then they are hit by a higher intensity laser that displaces their electrons to form the plasma that produces extreme ultraviolet. That whole process, where the margin of error is essentially zero, has to be repeated 50,000 times.
The wavelength of that light is 13.5 nanometers. To visualize that, imagine regular light as an ocean with a high tide. When that tide arrives, you will see it. Extreme ultraviolet is just like that ocean. But its tides are ripples only the fish in it can feel. Those ripples cannot be seen with the naked eye. Even then, those ripples would still be too big for such a comparison. EUV is so volatile that it is absorbed by almost every substance it comes into contact with. To interact with it and put it to use, ASML uses the world's flattest mirrors, made by glassmaker Zeiss, another European giant. For perspective, if these mirrors were the size of Germany, a country whose borders span 357,000 square kilometers, the largest bump would be no more than a tenth of a millimeter. This process has to take place in a clean room, essentially what it sounds like, just taken to the extreme. In these rooms, very few particles in the air are allowed in or out as these disrupt the very fragile work that happens in them. That's why almost any picture of these machines with a person nearby has them wearing a white suit. What these EUV lithography machines do is provide a literal vacuum comparable to that of space for extreme ultraviolet to bounce around against those ultra-flat mirrors. If there is even an atom of an element like oxygen, that light would get blocked.
By every conventional metric, this is the most complex machine to ever exist in all of human history. It is the only machine that can do what it does, and because of that fact, it has ceased to be a marvel of the scientific community and more of a Cold War era weapon.
This is Christophe Fouquet, and in a nutshell, he leads the company worth 2% of the economy of the European Union. Just this year, one of his largest markets, China, was denied access to his company's products by the United States and its allies. This ban was founded on the belief that China's ability to compete with fellow global powers was actively growing through ASML's advanced chipmaking equipment. This ban was achieved through the Wassenaar Arrangement and the Foreign Direct Product Rule.
The Wassenaar Arrangement is a multilateral trade arrangement that serves as a way for the US and its allies to control the export of weapons of mass destruction, their delivery systems, and their components. I'm not an expert in economics, but one way to visualize it is as a restaurant.
It can serve the best food on the planet, but if it decides you're a risk or a nuisance, you are prohibited from entering the building, denying you access to their amazing food.
On the other hand, the Foreign Direct Product Rule is a way for the US to ban the distribution of foreign products, like those EUV lithography machines, to certain customers, like China, if they use American components. It's very controversial because it's kind of a way for the US to assert jurisdiction over foreign private companies.
Although ASML is the only company in the world that can build and distribute them, the development of these lithography machines is very much a shared effort. Besides its European partnership with Zeiss, one of its subsidiaries is the US-based Cymer company. The San Diego firm was acquired in 2013 for their technology making use of excimer lasers, such as argon fluoride, to generate deep ultraviolet, another light on the electromagnetic spectrum.
Deep ultraviolet, or DUV, is essential in photolithography to image patterns onto silicon wafers, slices of conductive material used as the foundation of semiconductors and integrated circuits.
As valuable as Cymer is to ASML, it has become a chokehold its home country uses to stunt the growth of its rivals, and in turn, one of ASML's largest customers. With this ban, concerns have arisen that China will now be forced out of its comfort zone and will decide to invest heavily in its own semiconductor industry. This runs in parallel with growing tensions in the Pacific as China holds its view of Taiwan as part of the mainland and TSMC as the heavyweight of the island's economy.
ASML's new generation of its price lineup, High NA EUV, will hover around the $400 million mark. Its components are manufactured across Connecticut, California, Germany, and the Netherlands to become a finished product in Veldhoven.
This ban reinforces a shift toward more protectionist policies by the US and EU, while the rest of the world stays locked out of this walled garden. The magic that defines EUV is responsible for plunging the globe into its current AI frenzy, but as the science becomes even more powerful, the world is rapidly being split into those who design the future and those who stay locked in the past, or forge their own path. Christophe Fouquet does not need an army or a seat at the UN to rule the world's architecture. As long as ASML stays on top of the infrastructure behind the Magnificent Seven and the nations that rely on them, the world will track its single point of failure to the humble suburbs of the Netherlands.
If you want to know more about the industry, just check out this deep dive I made on the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.